All right, so please send your Modernism Wheel to Notability and follow along with this Edpuzzle video to fill in your wheel. So first thing on the first page of your wheel, you're going to be filling in those blanks. So modernism takes place in the 20s, in the 1900s, during this period of the Roaring Twenties. So modernism came out of the horrors of the First World War, which caused people to lose faith in humanity and the power of reasoning. So people sought to find new ideas that were more applicable to the 20th century life. So this creates this modernization and expansion of the industrial sector. And so there was a lot of stuff that was inspired and a lot of carelessness and fun and frivolousness because of this kind of lack of hope and faith. So it created this new standard and also new roles for gender and cultural groups. So you should have filled in that first part of your modernism wheel, and now you're going to fill in the spokes. So we've done this before, remember, with postmodernism, looked kind of like this. So now we're doing modernism for the Great Gatsby. So you're going to be filling in each spoke with the modern element. So put the title of each element and then write in a brief description that'll make sense to you. So don't write the whole slide, something brief. So by the end of these slides, you'll have filled out this whole wheel. So first up, we have disillusionment. Disillusionment. This is a big one because it also kind of represents the vibe of this period. It kind of means that what you expect is going to happen doesn't end up happening. So there's this sense of disillusionment and rejection of social and cultural systems that seemed outdated. So there was this breakdown of societal norms. People had this depressive behavior. There was this uncertain future. And there was just this break of tradition. So people lost faith and felt that America had no idols. We had no one to look to. We didn't have this faith. It was kind of this, what now? Okay. So remember, brief description. So maybe you're just filling out what is in pink or underlined, or that you wrote there's no idols. You have no one to look up to anymore. Okay, anti-hero. So this is somebody that wouldn't necessarily be someone you would normally look up to. Maybe they're alienated. Maybe they have strange morals or background. The way they find their truth is doing something that we wouldn't always support, but we still root for them. So not the traditional hero. Then we have fragmentation. So this was also a postmodern element where you have fragments of information that Salt Bae is kind of sprinkling throughout his piece, and you need to pick up each fragment that is left and kind of connect the dots as you go. It means you don't get everything all at once. It puts an active role on the reader because you have to piece information together. So you don't always get this chronological narrative. It could be discontinuous. Maybe there's flashbacks going to an earlier time, interrupting the sequence of events. And so you're putting together these pieces of information. Okay, and then we have individualism. It's kind of just as it sounds, it's individualistic. So the main character or somebody is lonely or alienated or isolated. So it's this reversal of traditional gender and racial norms. And you kind of champion the individual and you celebrate their inner strength. And then we have this one, no universal truth. So this is kind of showing that there is no one-size-fits-all experience. So individual beliefs form the experience. So this is putting you in the first-person narrative. You're getting this reality, and then you're also getting a perception. So maybe the narrator is giving you their own perception. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the only way, right? It might be up to you to figure out the other way. And so it's different point of views, like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's no one-size-fits-all statement. So maybe something is said that another person doesn't agree with. That's no universal truth. Your statement or fact or truth is not the same as the next person's. It's all about the perspective of the individual. We have experimentation. So our authors, our artists, our writers, our people, they're trying new things. Whether this is breaking rules of syntax or exploring devastation of the First World War, we want to make it new. So that was a rallying cry of modern authors and artists. So an example would be our flappers. So there's a new type of woman in the 20s. Women now have the right to vote. They have new freedoms. They can dress differently. They don't have to be as respectable. They can be more kind of frivolous. There's also new ideas, new technology, and new writing. Poems don't have to rhyme. Stories don't have to flow in order. So this experimentation reflects the disruption of what's happening in the world. So modernism is kind of reflecting the period of the 20s in the 1900s. Okay, and then figurative language and symbols. Hopefully this is a review. So an example of figurative language is juxtaposition. So this is kind of a new one for modernism, where it represents something that is unusual. Like if you're at a restaurant and a waiter serves you fish and ice cream together, that seems like it wouldn't work. It seems like something that shouldn't go together, but it does. So represents something unusual. So maybe a cat and a mouse sharing a friendship, right? It shouldn't work, but it does. And then other symbols, right? Symbols in general, like something representing something else, imagery, metaphors, and symbols and images to suggest meanings. So instead of just having a statement to explain something, some object or thing is referenced throughout a work, and it represents something greater than itself. Maybe it represents something to a character. And then this one, stream of consciousness. So this really just means this continuous, uninterrupted flow. So in writing, it kind of is this technique showing what's going on inside and outside the character's mind. It might not make sense. It's supposed to represent a natural flow of thoughts. So if I were just to let all my thoughts, see, there it goes. If I were to let all my thoughts flow out, it could just get crazy and muddled and maybe not make complete sense. But in making it new, some authors are including the stream of consciousness, where you're just kind of putting everything out there all on a page, and it's to kind of mimic what's happening in the character's mind. So maybe you're missing punctuation, or you're getting a different form, like in poetry. Maybe it's not in chronological order. Maybe thoughts are quite randomly put together. Kind of this interior monologue, stream of consciousness. Okay, and I just want to show you a couple of examples with comics. So this first comic on the top, our troubled times are causing anxiety, depression, anger, and disillusionment. Remember, that was one of our words. We must do something. I have. What? I invented a new emoji. So this emoji represents the feelings of this time period, this disillusionment. The second one also shows disillusionment. It says statues have been removed here because there are no heroes anymore. So remember disillusionment, there's this corruption of the American dream. There's this alienation. There's this feeling of not having heroes or idols or people to look up to. Just kind of those feelings of hopelessness. And like, what now? Nothing I can do can harm me because we're in this weird state and I can just kind of live rebelliously. So these two got in a car crash. The one on the left says, "You ran a red light, moron." And the guy on the right says, "That's your conception of the color red." So what element could that be? If one idea is true for one person, not the other person, this could be no universal truth, right? Perception is up to the individual. And speaking of individual, here is a bunch of sheep and they all say "ma," and the other one is a different color and he says "ma," right? He's different. This is showing individualist. He's breaking away from society. A lot of these elements kind of overlap too. So you could use a different element to describe this as well, as long as you can support it. Here is a funky one where there's all these different pieces of information in this comic and it's kind of disoriented, right? So you could use a couple different modern elements to describe this. Maybe you're talking about fragmentation, where you're getting some pieces of information here, some pieces there. It's not linear, right? It's kind of out of order. There's another one, maybe stream of consciousness, where all of this guy's thoughts are all spilling out all at once. Maybe it's experimentation, right? You're making it new. This is not a traditional setup for a comic frame. And one more. Here is a hero, right? And he says, "Don't think of it as breaking in. This is just extreme knocking." So a hero is supposed to kind of follow rules, right? And this guy is saving the day, but he's breaking rules and saving the day. So he's your anti-hero, right? Not your traditional hero, not someone you would necessarily expect, but you still root for him. Okay, and last thing is I have a poem I want to go over with us. This is really going to help us with what we're doing next class. I'm going to go through it very quickly just so you can kind of see the ideas behind what we will be doing next. So here is a poem by William Waring Cooney. It's called 1929, and he says, "Some folks hollered hard times in 1929. In 1928, say I was way behind. Some folks hollered hard times because hard times were new. Hard times is all I ever had. Why should I lie to you? Some folks hollered hard times. What is it all about? Things were bad for me when those hard times started out." Okay, so we have a soapstone. What's the subject of the piece? Hard times, right? It gets repeated all throughout this poem. The occasion, it's obvious it's in 1929, so this is the US economy. We know it's during the Great Depression. The audience is people facing hard times, especially during the 1900s. The purpose, it's kind of these communal feelings, right? You're feeling hard times. I've been feeling hard times. So the feelings of America, these hardships, how they take a toll. This guy thinks he's had hard times longer than other people. So it's showing someone always has it harder. And then the speaker, someone who's had a hard life. It's an individual's perspective. And the tone, it's sad and meaningful, maybe a little annoyed because maybe he's always had these hard times. Okay, so what is the poem conveying? These three questions on the right are, once you kind of analyze your soapstone, these three questions are really getting to the meat and bones. What is this poem talking about? Well, it's hard times, right? Gets repeated. He's talking about life's difficulties and complications. Elements of modernism. Okay, number two, think about all of those elements you just put into your wheel and what we just talked about through this ed puzzle. What are elements of modernism? Remember, there's multiple you can use to identify. Maybe you're thinking individualism. Maybe you're thinking disillusionment. Maybe you're thinking no universal truth. I'm thinking symbol. Okay, so he keeps repeating hard times. So I use the quote hard times, right? It gets repeated. It's showing that hard times are a symbol for the Great Depression. Hard times symbolize the Great Depression. So this repetition is a symbol for the vibe of the economy during this time period in America. How does this poem connect to the 20s atmosphere of the time? It portrays the feelings of hopelessness and disillusionment felt during this era and economy. Okay, so really brief, just rundown of this poem, and this is going to help you with what you're doing next class. I would really love if you go and fill out the Google form where you choose which poem you want to read next class so I can set up groups before class. So please fill out the Google Doc that is attached with this Modernism Wheel assignment. All right, thank you very much.